Hey, it's Matt from thepodcastsetup.com, here to recommend a few podcast hosts if you're kicking off your podcast in 2026. First, just a little bit of advice before we kick things off. If you're brand new to this stuff, I've been podcasting now for nearly 20 years, worked at a podcast hosting company, run the Podcast Setup newsletter. I talk a lot about podcasting, live and breathe this stuff. There's a few misconceptions that I just want to get out of the way first before I give you my recommendations. Okay, first piece of advice for those of you who are brand new to this, really trying to figure out the podcasting thing. Apple is not the place where you host your podcast. Apple is a great distribution channel for podcasts, has one of the great podcast listening apps. They invest heavily in podcasting, even though it doesn't really seem like it. They do support the open industry of podcasting thus far, and I give them their kudos for that. But that's not where you're going to host your podcast episodes. So then you might be thinking, well, do I host my podcast episode at Spotify or at YouTube? And you could. I'll make some quick distinctions so we don't go down a really deep rabbit hole of like YouTube versus podcasting versus video versus Spotify. But when you start at Spotify, the whole experience is to live in Spotify. It's not a place where you want to settle your home base for your podcast. Remember, Spotify is a major tech platform, audio, now video, music, podcasting, all of that stuff. Who knows what comes next? It's not a place where I want to put my hard-earned content, like the stuff I'm investing in, and building it there. You can, build your, podcast for free at Spotify, but it's not really meant for you to take it and distribute it everywhere else on the web. They really want you to focus on Spotify. So I don't invest my time at Spotify. Same goes for YouTube. There's a larger argument about SEO and video and like who's listening versus who's watching. I'll make the argument that the best audience for your podcast are the listeners. Video is a great component, but if you really want to stand out in video, you're going to do a lot more these days than just turn on the camera, but to each his own. I really want to focus in on audio, and YouTube is going to take the same page out of Spotify's book where they want to have that whole experience built into YouTube because that's the game. They're going to do things like sell ads against your channels. Yes, they'll help monetize you and stuff like that. That's for a different video for sure, but it's all about being in their platform. I mean, Spotify and YouTube, I guess you could say go head to head in podcasting. YouTube is a giant compared to Spotify, but they're still like competing for those ears and eyes in terms of like the word podcasting these days. But I'm not investing and using them as my central hub for my podcast. Okay, so why get a podcast host? Podcast hosts, and I'll try to summarize this as quickly as possible, use an old technology called RSS. It is a tried and true piece of technology which allows somebody to subscribe to your show on that podcast host and listen to you anywhere. 99.99% of the time, it's just audio, and it's just audio is not a bad thing. Again, I've said this before, audio is the best, most intimate medium for a connected audience, to the host, to the podcast, to the brand, to the community, to the organization, to the nonprofit, whatever you're using a podcast for. Getting an RSS feed, getting an audio distribution of your show up and out into the world is going to be the best thing for you in terms of that longevity. It's just longevity. It just takes time to get there, depending on what topics and how you are as a podcaster and what kind of show you're producing. So there's a lot of variables there. But getting that host that podcast host allows you to distribute wherever you want. Distribute to Apple, distribute to Spotify, and distribute to YouTube, but with that, what I'll call defense mechanism of, well, now this is over here. Like there's these big tech giants out in the world that are taking in my content. But even if like YouTube shuts me off, I still have my distribution point of my podcast host. Or if Spotify changes the way they handle podcast episodes, now they want to charge people that, well, now I can pull away from Spotify and I still have my RSS feed, which can be broadcast anywhere. So as much as we, love these huge platforms of Apple, Spotify, and YouTube, you never know what's going to happen next in this crazy technology space. And if there's ever a time you don't want to be there, or they cut you out for whatever reason, or they stop monetizing you, having the home base of a podcast host is going to be the biggest investment you have in your brand, in your content, to reroute and still connect to the world at large. Okay, so here are my top 3 podcast hosts for 2026. If you're looking to start a free podcast, or you are really interested in a lot of the podcasting 2.0 stuff that I talk about, if you want really highly detailed analytics, if you want some kind of ad network or dynamic ad network, RSS.com is a great choice for you. I use it for one of my podcasts, Our Beloved Medium. It's a fantastic host. They now have that free plan, which I've covered on the channel before. So you can start with nothing. I would start paying with nothing. And then if you want to upgrade to the better analytics and some of the deeper AI tools that they have and advertising tools they have, then you have to get a paid account. But you can start for free in 2026, your podcast at RSS.com. Definitely check them out for more details. Okay, next up is the podcast host that I use for a majority of my shows, and I've been using them now for 3 to 4 years. I know the founders. I know the founders of RSS.com. I know the founder of Transistor.fm, but it's Transistor.fm. There it is right there. I like Transistor.fm as a well-rounded podcast host. They don't have like all of the tools that RSS has. They don't have a free account. They don't have really deep analytics. They don't have all the podcasting 2.0 stuff, but they do a really good job at just being good, right? Like I don't have to worry about it. I know it's going to work. And there are some really nice features like transcripts, the way that they handle multiple podcasts, and it's not confusing at all. So the analytics are nice. They're not as rich as, say, RSS, but it's just, it's there, and I don't have to scratch my head trying to figure all this stuff out. Hosting multiple podcasts, I'm always trying new podcasts. Their player is nice. So I recommend Transistor.fm if you're looking for that sort of general purpose. Maybe I'm going to launch a couple shows. Maybe I want it to be affordable in that $25 to $50 range per month with multiple podcast episodes and transcripts, and that's really important to me. Then I go with Transistor. I've been using it now for a few years without any issue. So the third one that I would recommend is Buzzsprout. They, especially if you want to get into the game of monetizing your podcast, they have a whole monetization network with ads. You can opt into ads. You can buy ads for greater reach for your podcast on their network. It's one of the biggest podcast hosting companies in the space, and I don't know them personally, sort of like I know Transistor and RSS, but they seem like good folks. They seem like they want podcasting to succeed, and I would definitely give them a look if RSS and Transistor just aren't fitting it for you. And Buzzsprout is a fantastic choice. They, again, good player, good websites, good all around, and especially if you want to do the whole ad network thing, I would definitely look at Buzzsprout. Okay, so if you're starting your podcast in 2026, those are my 3 recommendations, front-loaded, of course, with some information about the podcast space. Hosting on Apple is not a thing. I wouldn't rely totally on Spotify and YouTube to host my podcast. I would look at one of the 3 podcast hosts that I recommend, RSS, Transistor, or Buzzsprout. You can find the links below. Click on those. I'll get a little bit of a commission on those affiliate links. It really helps support the channel. Or if you don't want to click those links, just go directly to their websites. Thanks for watching today's video. Subscribe to the channel if you want more, thepodcastsetup.com, where we talk about podcasting, podcast setups, podcast information, and all the other fun podcasting stuff. Happy New Year, and we'll see you in the next video.